Hyperphantasia, a downside. Hyperphantasia is the ability for an individual to create highly graphic images in his or her mind's eye. I didn't know I was hyperphantasic until near the end of my 30s, and I'm still happy to not be, as this is a self-diagnosis, but it seems the most fitting description so far of what goes on in my mind. I thought everyone was afflicted like me, that they had constant images in mind, memories coming back out of nowhere, replays of movies watched or a rerun of conversations had, and similarly running through future events and conversations that were yet to happen, creating anxieties of possible outcomes of things that would come. It wasn't until I explained these thoughts to my husband that we started to notice a difference in thought process, way beyond being a man and a woman, and after we discovered he is aphantasic, it made me realise that I might not be thinking like everyone else. In fact, it made me think no one is thinking the same at all. It explained a lot of things I had been looking for an answer to. I spent a lot of time in my own company as a child, despite having siblings. I have always been quite able to entertain myself, having many hobbies and keeping my brain as occupied as I can. I was constantly thinking, scheming, planning and analysing. This hasn't changed. Phobias, it seems though, were very set too, and being able to hyper-visualise has made my fears never go away. Now I know why, I am not so hard on myself, believing it's not actually my fault. But for years I couldn't work out why certain images wouldn't go away. Why did things stay with me for so long? Movies, articles, experiences, books, any input could come back at any time out of the blue. I've learned to control them mostly now, but it's been hard work. The one that stuck and commandeered my childhood was Jaws. I know I am very much not alone with that one, but it made me wonder if this is part of the reason and differences between us that make some people have phobias and others not. Some people like horror and are scared by it, others not, and potentially allow some people to identify better with others or be more susceptible to fear. I suspect this may be why some people are prime subjects for being hypnotised. If someone can picture what you are saying, does that help? But my nemesis was Jaws. Watched around 8 or 9 years old, I think, it stayed with me. It imprinted in my brain and resurfaced often. My grandparents had a swimming pool and used to take us on holiday, to where there would always be a pool. I couldn't escape it, but it was so bad that for the first year after watching, I refused to have a bath and would only use the crappy push-on shower head. My brain took it further, you see. It created a mini Jaws that could come up the plug hole and then turn into a big shark. It took me about a year to get a grip on that. I just had to suck it up and deal with it. Then it became a weird family joke that I was terrified of sharks, and I just accepted it as that. A weird thing that didn't bother most people. I must be the odd one out. I still have it. When living in Spain for a couple of years, I had a pool with a rented property as it was part of the dream. But within 2 days of trying to enjoy a swim, it came back. I couldn't help visualising a shark, in the water, at the bottom in the dark where I couldn't quite see. I was in my late 30s by this point. I felt like an idiot. But it was the same with swimming pools back then. I would focus on the filter, thinking it would come through there, and would quicken my pace. Swimming wasn't fun anymore after becoming an extended anxiety attack each time. Although, on the plus side, I did win a bronze medal for backstroke in the cadet championships because I was thinking of sharks. But for having a healthy relationship with water, it did nothing. By now understanding that my brain can latch on to anything it likes and I can't control what stays and what goes, I'm being more careful about what I read and watch. Hyperphantasia has led me to understand a bit more about why I am different from others, and has made me realise that each person is more unique than I had given them credit for. Forethought and Consequences, a follow-up. This is a follow-up from my previous piece, Forethought and Consequences, which is from the angle of hyperphantasia and aphantasia. I now find myself giving it thought again, since we the many find ourselves being dictated to by the few, in a rather haphazard way. And there are 2 ways to look at it. Incompetence, meaning they have no idea what they are doing and have no concern for what happens after. or they are severely corrupt and are well aware of what will occur and what that might be. I really did believe until a few years ago that everyone could think things through properly, especially people in decision-making roles. I have been grossly mistaken. Not everyone does in fact have the ability to plan out future scenarios mentally, or even acknowledge or understand the forethought that goes into them, and the consequences that are considered along the way. This was proven to me way before this recent episode unfolded, and what often may have been overlooked as just being careless or thoughtless behaviour could in fact just be ignorance or inability to see the outcome of their actions. They really didn't think ahead to what may occur from their words or actions, because they can't and therefore don't foresee that as a possible outcome. This is where it seems that the people in charge of presenting information and making decisions are lacking in this ability. I have been using predictive modelling my entire life, but the human version, which uses your brain and factors in variables as necessary and can adapt to new information, upgrade and revise the data as needed to predict the range of possible outcomes. And as part of the data yourself, you are able to change the outcome if so desired. As I understand it, we are using computer modelling programs to construct our society currently, and basing important regulations on it which affect people's lives. It would appear to me that we are running a much slower version of that, where a human has invented a program to model in the same way, but will only be as good as its programmer and the data it has access to, and cannot think on its feet or factor in anything new without it being input from the human. And that's where we have the problem, clearly for all to see, which isn't a theory. It has been proven time and time again. The computer models and those behind them have been wrong. And those with a faster, more competent inbuilt modelling system are having to just sit and painfully watch the slowness at which we now operate. Surely we could be utilising these inventions in a more effective manner if we are to be at the whim of them. But on a more interactive level, people's inability to view the consequences of decisions being made around them and for them is alarming. It's more than a lack of vision and imagination. It's as if general reasoning is also missing. So I have to question, was it there to begin with? Is there a certain amount of life you can indeed go through without requiring the need to think things through or consider what will come of it? When people say they are disappointed to see so many complying and not caring about their freedom and future being taken away, is it perhaps their expectation of people was misplaced? We just presumed people cared, or thought things through, or were able to reason, and until faced with something to expose those differences, we didn't see them. But it turns out they are very important in the bigger scheme of things. Nearly all of the consequences I saw coming have unfolded already, so I will definitely continue to follow my own thoughts in this and try and stay on top of the strange things that appear to be coming for the next few years. A consequence or a cause? There is much talk on the street about conditions, labels and categories. The one in particular I will focus on for this article will be ADHD. I find the subject very interesting, having already speculated slightly of a crossover into hyperphantasia. But within that, I also consider that neither condition exists at all, but is perhaps a label and construct, as with many other things, to help put ourselves into categories for them, and then be standardised and medicated. But I can't help leaning towards there being an issue, and have been trying to put my finger on what the cause was. Now we see an effect. ADHD isn't a new diagnosis of only this generation. It spans back to the 70s, and I had thought maybe it was a simple case of high-spirited children having their spirits dampened, quashed and medicated to make them fit into society and the mainstream. Strangely though, as many have pointed out over the years, with a highly stimulating drug apparently to counteract a highly stimulated brain, and that may indeed have been the angle or purpose. But today I came up with another thought towards it, which I theorise was to help bring about an ADHD response in people, rather than treat it as they say. And as it seems the powers that be often say one thing and do the opposite, so I have no reason to presume this would be any different. A bait and switch type of thing, as we have observed a number of times over the years in various forms. What if, Say, the stimulating medication given to calm the overworking brain is there to speed up the processing centre, to actually allow a hyper state of mind to adapt to the constant stream of information they wanted society to be saturated with and develop a certain threshold for it. There was a quote in Ready Player One that stayed with me on this line of thought, that ties in here to me. We estimate we can sell up to 80% of a user's vision without inducing seizures. So, I wondered if the companies and marketing machine, who know well in advance of coming technologies and trends, would need a way to be able to make people more accepting of the landscape they wanted to present, knowing it wouldn't be normal for people to have the attention span to digest all the information or keep up with their constant conveyor of consumerism, using a normal thing they get to deem a problem, then being able to medicate said problem, thereby getting the drugs you want to test into people on the ground in a real life setting and distributed as a matter of daily life. It's then encouraged by average people down the chains of society. And then along the way, if it was realised that the excess demands and speed at which the brain was working started causing all sorts of behavioural issues and what we would now call mental health issues, would they pull the plug? Or decide it was an opportunity to test those people even further, apply more drugs and medications and labels to combat anyone noticing and tracing it back to a time before all the interference? Perhaps. There is another option though, and sort of the flip side of it. So 2 theories, I guess. One being they created the wave of hyper-processing with people's brains and pharmaceuticals, and try to further it or control it with more of the same. So we will become bound and integrated into their fast-moving systems online, because life will seem too dull or slow without it. Or the second theory being, maybe people have developed a way to hyper-think and process information at a pace they did not foresee, and wish to control and dampen that with drugs and distractions. It's also possible that Theory 2 occurred as a consequence anyway of Theory 1, but could have emerged just through environmental changes and a requirement for survival in this new tech world we are being drawn into. But remember the good old days when you just turned off the TV or stopped listening to constant noise of the radio? How normal and quiet everything seemed. "10 Lives to Find Yourself." That title was initially for a short story, I thought, but it turns out it was a deeper idea, put to one side until it is time to revisit it. I have had an interest in the idea of reincarnation for a few decades, and have theorised myself on it as a concept and process. But hearing accounts of experiences said to be put forth by mostly children, and some adults who don't just grow out of it, it's quite compelling. I considered it years ago when giving thought to imaginary friends, and how the mind might create such elaborate ideas with what appeared to be limited life experience at the time. And a multitude of psychological ideas and reasonings get put forward, which all seem quite solid on their logic. Overactive imagination, loneliness, creativity, and other words given to make it all seem normal and childish, despite the fact that some of the imagined experiences are quite detailed, adult, and sometimes a bit horrific. One of my short stories crosses into this realm slightly, and one I have published in A Short Walk, and I've just put on here too. It's called Dead Until 12, and I realised that I have always thought there was a recycling process of what I guess we would call the soul, that there are lessons to be learnt, information to be gathered, and as Gandalf said in the Two Towers, I have been sent back until my task is done. I also revisit the thoughts of hyperphantasia, and how I have described it as a feeling of overlaid memories trying to get through, but not quite sure which life they are from. Another article is in progress about déjà vu, which I think may stray into this subject somewhat. I would also suggest watching Dark City, if you haven't taken the hint from my many previous mentions, for an idea of how messing with and swapping the memories of lifetimes can create a somewhat thin or strained state of mind in some. Perhaps that is part of the need for so much medication and conditioning, to replace what it is we are born knowing, or to make it seem like a strange movie we watched long ago, or that our imagination is playing tricks on us, which may well be the case, but I get the feeling in some cases it really isn't. Picture it. Many times you have probably heard things begin with, imagine that, and picture it in your mind. And sometimes you may do that when requested. Or your mind finds its own way to wander and create something of its own. And create it does. For many people, in many ways. And when you are bombarded with various sources of input and imagery, it can be an overwhelming overload for that input. For some it lingers too, or manifests into something else, or can lay dormant until a completely random time is chosen by your brain to resurrect it and make it a thought. It isn't something that people can control either, it seems. Although you may be able to determine its path once it's arrived, or minimise it taking over and disrupting where your mind was, where it comes from and why is still a mystery as far as I know. Being incorporated and stored by your processing centres, filed for later use or dismissed as not needed by your awareness. And then something else happens, which we aren't aware of, because it then decides what to do with the image, information, thought or idea itself, chucking it back at you with no prompting sometimes, or at least not a conscious one. There may well be other factors which determine why a memory of something comes back or pops up out of the blue, as they might say, but we are not privy to why that is apparently. And an extra curveball comes our way with thoughts and memories, as they can and do interweave themselves with our subconscious and can appear in dreams, which can then alter our perception towards it, or turn into something entirely new. Quite an odd thing. And depending on your level of imaginings, then I guess it can be more vivid and disturbing in some minds more than others. My book, Meeting in the Middle of Nowhere, gives an idea of what it is like to have what they would call hypervisualization happening. And my article, Hyperphantasia, A Downside, gives a brief overview of how it might affect someone, with fears, phobias, and how the brain will hold on to things you might very much like to let go of. But it is down to the individual to try as best they can, to work out the best way to keep your mind in order, to filter what goes in, to work through what does, and try not to let it get too cluttered or crazy in there. You are the only one who has to live in there, hopefully. And you know what they say about things and people getting to live rent-free in your head. So for this, imagine your mind and thoughts are your living room, or bedroom if that's your personal space. And all the things you view, talk about and see are things knocking on that door wanting to get in. You may well have left the door open and it's already beyond what we would call personal space. But scale it back a bit. Make it an empty room again, starting with just you. There is a knock at the door, and it's a horror film with terrible imagery that wants to come in and sit with you for a while. Next, it's the media knocking. They want you to sit and read all their headlines, and all your acquaintances, family, colleagues, friends, work, movies, books, music, words, and ideas you have ever been exposed to. They all work their way in, and it's down to you to sort through it and manage it, because if left unchecked, it seems that the mind has a very curious ability to completely unravel. So, keep an eye on yourself, as you are really the only one who stands half a chance of actually knowing what is going on in your mind. Unless, of course, it wasn't yours to begin with.